Hey everybody, Tekking101 here. How you doing today? And, oh, I'm doing great, thanks for asking. But no, today's video is something special, something unique I got planned for you today. This is another theory debunk video, kind of the same thing I did with, the Luffy-Roger thing a while back. But I'll be honest with you, this theory, I didn't even know was, like, a thing. I didn't even know it was this prevalent, but, probably about a month ago, I started getting questions regarding this on my live stream, and, they just kept coming, and I keep getting messages on my social media about it. And I don't know if you guys have had to deal with something coming this many times. I know I certainly haven't, so I figured, alright, I should probably look into this, break it down, and see what's going on with this. So the theory goes like this. You know Dr. Vegapunk, the head scientist in the world government, the man that invented the pacifista technology, and has the ideas in his head that go 5 centuries beyond anything that exists currently in the One Piece world. He has all these crazy ideas. We've yet to actually see him in the story, like in the present storyline. We don't even know what he looks like, what his face is, which makes it fun for thumbnails, because I'm like, well, we don't know what he looks like, so I'll just go with Rick from Rick and Morty. Okay, sure, fine. Yeah, that guy, though. Did you know that guy, Dr. Vegapunk, is in fact Admiral Kizaru, Borsalino? They're the same guy. Yeah, I know. Now, your first reaction to this is probably the same reaction as mine, and that's like, that's ridiculous, that's silly, just discard it. But once again, they kept coming in, and I'm thinking, alright, let me give this freaking benefit of the doubt, let me look into see what the contentions of this theory are, and if they make sense, they make sense. If they don't, then I'll try to debunk it. Now, we're here today, so I'm gonna try to debunk it. But basically, I did some research into this, and this theory, I tracked down a Reddit post from about 3 years ago. So this has been around for a while. That's where I think this really originated from. But I think the thing that really sparked the interest in this theory recently was there's a YouTube user by the name of Black Leg Vinsmoke that made a video talking about this theory at the end of January, and that's right around the time I started getting questions about this, and that video is pretty popular. I think it almost has like 300,000 hits or something like that. So I think that's what really started it. And then there was other people that, of course, made responses to that. So that's what, we're going to hear today to look at this theory. Now, I want to make one thing clear. I'm not making this as, like, a direct response to Black Leg Vinsmoke's video. There's some stuff in there I might reference, but this is, like I said, a theory that's been around for at least 3 years. And I noticed some stuff in his video that he, just took from, like, the Reddit, posts. So I'm mostly just going to be addressing the theory in general. But there's 3 main contentions to this. Contentions of why Vegapunk and Kizaru are the exact same person all along. So we're going to go through those contentions. I'm just going to read those off, and then after that we're going to debunk each one. And I also have some other additional things I want to bring up as well. So let's get right into it. Contention number 1 for the Vegapunk is Kizaru theory. We see this image here of Kizaru in his younger days as a child. Oda was asked to draw each of the admirals as children, so he of course draws Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru, or back then I guess he was just known as Borsalino. So this is a canon image that Oda drew. Alright, now, what do we see from this image? Well, we see that young Borsalino there is in sort of like a cold environment. We can see some snow around him. We see he's kind of poor. He's not wearing a lot of clothing despite the cold climate. He's got like a patch in his hat, so, probably not a lot of money. He's sitting at a desk writing in a book, and we see a bunch of books stacked next to him, and he seems to have a very cheery attitude as he's just writing in this book by lantern light. So how does this mean Kizaru is Vegapunk? Well, we all know Vegapunk is a genius, so that means he probably reads a lot of books. We see a big stack of books next to young Borsalino here in his youth, and also it seems he's growing up in a very cold environment, most likely a winter island, and Vegapunk, from what we know, grew up on a winter island, Karakuri Island, which is the future land of Baltimore, and I think I'm just going to call it the future land of Baltimore, or just Baltimore from now on, because Karakuri sounds a lot like Katakuri, and I think I'm going to probably fuck that up at a few points, so just Baltimore from now on. So, yeah, Baltimore was a winter island. He seems to be on a winter island here. Vegapunk's a genius, obviously reads a lot. We see a big stack of books next to Kizaru here in his youth, so that's the first contention. The second contention is all about Sentomaru. Sentomaru is the personal bodyguard of Vegapunk. He's the big sumo dude. However, it's odd because he doesn't spend a lot of time around Vegapunk from the times that we've seen Sentomaru. Sentomaru was at the Sabaody Archipelago, and Vegapunk wasn't there, and the idea behind the contention is, okay, well, if he's the personal bodyguard of Vegapunk, how come he's not around Vegapunk. He would be not a really good bodyguard if you're not guarding the body, you know? Who he is around, though, is Kizaru. When Kizaru arrived at Sabaody, you know, Sentomaru was trying to get into contact with him and trying to locate the Straw Hats and everything. He refers to Kizaru as uncle, which is like a term of, like, endearment. It's ojiki in Japanese. It means basically, like, boss in Japanese. So, yeah, that's something to go along with there. You know, how come Sentomaru is hanging around Kizaru and not around Vegapunk, who that's supposed to be the person he's supposed to be guarding? Okay, so that's the second contention. Third contention is this, involving the Pacifista's lasers. The Pacifista were stated to be invented by Dr. Vegapunk, these army of robots that are all designed to look like Bartholomew Kuma, but are also outfitted with the same exact lasers that Kizaru uses in conjunction with his Pika Pika no Mi. So it's not that Vegapunk studied the lasers and incorporated them into the Pacifistas, it's that Kizaru is Vegapunk and incorporated his own Devil Fruit ability into the Pacifistas. Okay, now, there's a few other contentions I saw on a few different videos and on Blackleg Vinsmoke's video, but I think these are the three main contentions that people go with, so we're gonna stick with these ones. Alright, so now as I've given you the contentions, let's go and debunk each one. Alright, so the first contention is, here is a young Borsalino, he's got a stack of books next to him, and he's on a cold island, he's on a winter island, so therefore that must be a connection to Baltimore and the fact that he likes to read, he's a genius later on. Okay, well, the first problem with this is I don't think I need to have to really explain it all too well, but just because you read a lot doesn't make you a genius, okay? Let's just get that out of the way right now, and let's just accept that, okay? There's plenty of kids that read a lot of books growing up that don't become the next Albert Einstein, alright? So for the second problem of this, let's take a look at some other characters that Oda has drawn as children, because this is something Oda does quite a bit. Usually somebody will just send him an SBS question, like, hey Oda, I want to know what this group was like as children, like the Warlords, or the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, or the Doflamingo family, and Oda will draw little sketches of what they looked like as kids. In this case, it was just the admirals, but let's take a look at some other stuff here. Sometimes the characters, when they're drawn as children, sync up rather well to when they're adults. Other times, not so much. It's not always a given that what they're going to look like as kids, or the things that they're interested in as kids, is going to carry over to their adult characters, okay? A good example of this is Blueno, who was a member of CP9. When Oda drew the CP9 members as kids, you see Blueno hanging out with a baseball bat and a catcher's mitt, so he was into baseball growing up. But does that appear as his character traits at all when he's an adult? Does he, like, you know, like, mention a lot of baseball, or does he, like, name his attacks after baseball, you know, pitches, or, like, things, like Grand Slam? No, he doesn't. Baseball is not a part of Blueno's character at all when he's adult. He just liked it when he was a kid. Now, other times, it does sync up rather well. Like, for instance, you have Tashigi here with a sword next to her and reading about katanas. She's a sword geek when she's an adult. That makes sense. Then you have Monet, who's reading a book about birds. She's a harpy. It makes sense. However, with Kizaru, we just see a stack of books next to him. Now, it would be one thing if, like, Oda went out of his way to specify that those were science and math books, like he wrote on the side of them, like he did with, like, you have, like, Tashigi and Monet's books. He actually wrote what they are, but we have no idea what they are. I would have maybe given some idea to it if that was the case, but we just don't know. And we see Kizaru writing in the books also. He could just be learning how to write, or he could be, like, that could be a journal or something he's keeping. He could also, yeah, it could also be, like, a math problem or something he's working on, but what I mean is, it's not like a slam dunk there. It's not like, oh, he's reading a lot of books when he's a kid. He must be, you know, he must be a genius growing up. That doesn't necessarily sync up with other ones we've seen. Look at how Aokiji, Kuzan, was drawn as a kid. He looks like a ruffian. He looks like the kind of, like, you looking at me, punk, I'd beat the shit out of you. You know, he's got a freaking umbrella next to him. He's got, like, what looks like, honestly, poison he's drinking, because it looks like it has a skull on it. You know, it might be soda, it might be liquor, maybe he started drinking at a young age, who knows. He looks like a street punk. Does that really sync up with the Kuzan that we know in the current storyline? You know, I mean, yeah, he's sort of like a drifter right now after he left the Marines, but, you know, he's rather lazy, he's kind of chill, that's his attitude, he's sleeping a lot. You know, this seems much more angry and pissed off version of Kuzan that he had in his formative years, you know, but that's not how he acts right now. So you can't just take that right at face value. Like, he read books a lot as a kid, therefore he must be really, really smart, must be a genius as an adult. Another example of this is when Oda drew the Straw Hat Grand Fleet as children. You see Orlumbus hanging out there. Orlumbus is reading a book. You know, that doesn't mean necessarily Orlumbus is like this genius, you know. He's the captain of a fleet, so he's probably got some military experience, sure. But that's all it means. It means, like, okay, he read books when he was a kid. That's all that means. And in Kizaru's case, same exact things. He read books. Maybe he was learning how to write. Maybe he was keeping a journal. Could mean any number of things. We don't know what those books are. As for the case of him being in a cold environment, yeah, there's plenty of cold environments in the One Piece world, you know, all throughout the Grand Line. There's a plenty of islands that are, you know, the different types of, you know, summer, spring, autumn, and winter islands. Now, granted, we've only seen a few winter islands in the story. We've seen, you know, Drum Island, where Chopper is from. There was an island where Shanks was at, which was a winter island. We saw Karakuri Island, which is the future land of Baltimore. That's a winter island. We see some other ones scattered around that are not named, but just because he's in a cold environment, it doesn't mean that he's going to be from an island that we've already seen. The One Piece world is mostly a world filled with islands. There's only one main continent on the entire place. The world is like over 90% water. Islands are everywhere. There's a shit ton of winter islands all throughout the One Piece world. It doesn't mean that, like you have to understand, that's a very straight way of viewing it. That's like saying, well, here's Doflamingo's child picture, and we see some palm trees in the background. That must mean Doflamingo grew up on either a spring or a summer island. Therefore, Doflamingo grew up on Jaya. Or Doflamingo grew up on the coast of Alabasta or something like that. Like, no, he probably grew up on, like, he was, like, at a location that was tropical in this case. Kizaru was probably at a location that was colder in this case. And it might not even have been in the Grand Line. We saw, like, you know, the environments like Tequila Wolf, which was in the East Blue, which is, like, in the northern part of the globe. And that was a cold, frigid place as well. So any number of places that Kizaru could have grown up, not necessarily a winter island that we've definitely seen so far in the story. So those are my problems with it. Also, I've kind of seen some people bring up, and this is just like an aesthetic kind of choice, the design on Kizaru's hat when he was a kid is a striped design, and from the one image we've seen of Vegapunk, you know, we don't see his face, we don't see anything above his neck, but we see he's wearing a striped shirt. I mean, that's kind of stretching rather far, considering later on in his life, Kizaru is wearing pinstripes. Even before he became an admiral, he was wearing pinstripes. So it could just be from his love of pinstripes, and that's all there is to it there. And look at Garp. Garp as a child was like, oh, he's on top of a tiger carrying some treasure. It kind of looks like he's kind of like similar to like Sabo or Luffy when they were children. That's kind of an interesting parallel there. That's what Garp was like as a child. It looked like he was going to become a pirate growing up, but he ended up being a Navy soldier, the complete opposite. So you can't always go by that. Okay, so as for the second contention, there's a lot of issues I have with this one, all right? This is the Sentomaru contention. How come Sentomaru is never guarding Vegapunk's body? Instead, he's already hanging around Kizaru. Now, listen. This would have made a little bit more sense to me if Sentomaru and Kizaru both arrived at the Sabaody Archipelago at, like, the same time, right? Like, you know, you find out that Luffy punched Charlos, and they're like, okay, we need to send an admiral to the Sabaody Archipelago, and then Kizaru decided to go, and then Sentomaru decided to go with him, and they arrived at the same time, alright? I might give you a little bit more credit there. I could think of a few other issues with that, but I could give you at least some credit, like, okay, that's weird that Sentomaru would go with Kizaru. But here's the problem with this whole thing. Sentomaru was on the Sabaody Archipelago hours before Luffy punched Charlos. Before the whole thing with Kami being kidnapped, before the whole auction house, Sentomaru was there long before that. And I have to put on my One Piece nerd hat right here, but Sentomaru first appears in chapter 497 of One Piece. And in that chapter, he's just kind of like a shadowy figure on top of a building, but it's very obviously him. He's holding the battle axe. That's definitely Sentomaru. And that was the same chapter where the Tenryubito were first introduced, where we see Roswald for the first time, and then we have Papagu explaining who the Tenryubito even are to Luffy's group. This was before Kami got kidnapped, this was before Disco in the auction house, and Luffy punching Charlos, the word getting all the way back to Marine HQ, sending Kizaru. Sentomaru was already there. Okay, so it doesn't make any sense for, like, okay, Sentomaru must be guarding Vegapunk's body, he's there with Kizaru, therefore Kizaru must be Vegapunk, because Sentomaru was on the island well before Kizaru was even on the island. Vegapunk wasn't there either, so kind of an issue with that. Also, a problem with this, I just realized, is that whenever Luffy punched Charlos, they could have sent any one of the 3 admirals to Sabaody. They could have sent Akainu, Aokiji, or Kizaru, and they just happened to send Kizaru because I guess Kizaru was available. Sentomaru didn't know who was going to be sent. He was just kind of like there. So, you know, if they could have sent Aokiji, I'm sure Sentomaru would have acted in a very similar way with Aokiji or Akainu, like trying to gain contact with them and trying to track down the Straw Hats. You know, I don't think, maybe he had a special relationship with Kizaru beforehand because he called him Ojiki or like boss, but he didn't know Kizaru himself 100% was going to be sent. They didn't even know an admiral was going to come because this was well before Charlos was even punched. They had no idea that this was even going to go down today. Luffy is just really unpredictable. Also, kind of have to bring up the obvious here. Why would Kizaru need a bodyguard that is several dozen times weaker than him? I mean, that's kind of an issue there. Sentomaru is a strong dude. He's got armament hockey. He knows how to use that giant battle axe. I guess really not, because the one time he used it like the blunt end to hit Damalo Black. But, you know, he's not weak, but he's several times weaker than an admiral, okay? And Kizaru would not need a bodyguard, all right? It just wouldn't happen that way. This would be like if you had, like, I want you to picture a giant, like, 6'4" Marine that has huge bulging muscles, trains, like, with intense weights every single day, and this guy is decked out in full combat gear. He's got, you know, all the gear on him. He's got the helmet. He's got an automatic rifle. He's got a sidearm. He's got a knife. He's got grenades all over. Like, this guy, 6'4" Marine, huge muscles, decked out, ready for combat. And then he's got a bodyguard who's, like, 5'8", 5'9". You know, he works out. He's got some muscles, like a bouncer at a bar, you know, dressed out in some jeans and a shirt, and he's carrying around a baseball bat. Is like, you'd look at those two and you'd be like, oh, why does that big guy, like, you think the big guy would be the bodyguard for the smaller, because, like, why does he need a bodyguard? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Now, as for why Sentomaru doesn't usually hang around the person he's supposed to be guarding, I think I have a pretty good reason for that. Vegapunk, probably most of his time is, I would imagine, in a secret government facility. You know, like, I'm imagining, like, underneath Marine HQ, there's, like, a secret underground laboratory where he's conducting all of his experiments, and his, like, this is the Pacifista production laboratory. You want to make sure to keep that kind of place secure, you know? Either that, or he's in Marijois, because we've seen, like, the headquarters in Marijois. Maybe there's, like, a secret lab where he's working up in Marijois. You probably don't need a bodyguard while you're in, like, the secret government facility. If you're in Marijois, you don't need a bodyguard. If you're in, like, this secret underground lab at Marine HQ, the Marines are everywhere. You don't need a bodyguard. Now, sometimes Vegapunk probably has to leave his lab in order to go out into the field and maybe test some things, maybe go out and travel, collect research material, maybe stuff like that. In those situations, that's probably when Sentomaru accompanies him and, you know, is actually his bodyguard, okay? That's probably when he goes. But most of the time, Vegapunk's probably in his lab. He already probably has enough protection. He's safe. He doesn't need a fucking bodyguard around him absolutely 24/7. And Sentomaru might be in charge of certain field testing. Maybe the reason he went to Sabaody to begin with, the reason he was there before Kizaru, before the whole thing with Charlos, is because he was going to try to, he knew the supernovas were there, and maybe Vegapunk ordered him to go and test out the Pacifistas and see how they can deal in combat against these super rookies, you know? Let's go check that out, right? So, yeah. Major issues with Sentomaru. And the last contention is the laser thing. Okay, so you have the Pacifistas that are capable of firing Kizaru's laser, therefore, you know, Kizaru must have directly, you know, he must have been Vegapunk and installed his lasers. Now, we see X-Drake witnessing this, who was a former Marine. X-Drake used to be a rear admiral, right? And he sees this, and he's like, they reproduced Kizaru's laser. But at the same time, X-Drake was kind of surprised by this. He knew what the Pacifistas were, and he mentioned them by name, but he was a rear admiral. He was not in the science division. He was probably not working right next to Vegapunk this entire time. Alright, so he probably heard a rumor about these Pacifista robot things that he was developing. You know, there were probably, like, briefs and everything he learned about this, like, this is what's going on with the science division, but he probably wasn't right there next to them, okay? So, you know, when he sees this, he's probably just likening it to, like, oh, those robots can fire lasers, and those lasers are very similar to Kizaru's. You know, he probably wasn't like 100% sure because he didn't actually work directly with Vegapunk, but he was like sure enough, like something must have happened there. Kizaru must have adapted. Vegapunk must have adapted Kizaru's lasers to the robots. Now, another kind of idea going along with this theory is that most of the Marines do not know the whole Vegapunk is Kizaru thing. It's like only the Gorusei know about this, or like very high-ranking Marines, or the members of Vegapunk's science team know who he really is. The idea is that while he is Vegapunk, he wears a mask, and then he takes off the mask when performing his duties as Kizaru, as the admiral of the Navy. And that's the reason, like, while regular Marine soldiers don't recognize him, that's the reason that, like, X-Drake, who was a rear admiral, which is a pretty high rank in the Marines, but didn't work directly with Vegapunk, that's the reason he didn't recognize, like, oh, Kizaru is Vegapunk, you know, that's the reason you get around that. So those were the three main contentions, but I have some other stuff I want to bring up that why Vegapunk and Kizaru being the same person just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so you have the issue with the world government that has, you know, Vegapunk under their employ, right? And there's like, okay, you're a genius, you're going to invent these war machines for us and all this crazy tech, and you're going to use that, you know, to our benefit, basically, okay? Vegapunk has been stated many times to be the smartest person in all of One Piece. You know, his intelligence goes beyond anything else, all right? He is one of a kind, right? There are other really smart people in One Piece. Frankie is really smart, Caesar Clown, even Judge, you know, Vinsmoke, he's really smart, but Vegapunk is in a league all of his own, all right? You would think that the world government's one of their top priorities is to make sure that Vegapunk never dies, okay, or never gets seriously injured or anything like that. Because if they lose Vegapunk, there's not another Vegapunk, okay? That's like all they got. That would set them back immensely. There'd be no one else to figure out how all these pacifistas work, or repair them, or all this other technology that he's got down there, okay? He is a natural genius, all right? So why would he be an admiral? Why would he be fighting in this massive war? Why would he be going to locations that, you know, like that might result in him getting injured? Now, Kizaru is a strong dude, undeniable, but he's not invincible, okay? I can understand going to Sabaody, dealing with some pirate riffraff, but the War of Marineford, where Whitebeard was present, you know, Kizaru is not absolutely invincible. A Yonko was there. There were a bunch of really strong pirates there. So it's not like, okay, well, Vegapunk, he's in his lab, and he's like, alright, well, I'm gonna go fight in this war. I might not come back. There's a freaking Yonko out there. Oh, well, you think the world government would just let him do that? Let him go out and fight a massive war against a Yonko under the threat? Now, listen, they're strong, sure, but strength can be replaced easily compared to intelligence, alright? We saw that with Aokiji. Aokiji was an incredibly strong admiral, but he left. He just defected and left the Marines. But it wasn't like that completely crippled the Marines. They could replace him. They replaced him with Fujitora, or Green Bull if you prefer. You know, that was easily to replace. Same thing with Akainu. If Akainu was the one that left, they could have replaced him as well. But somebody like Vegapunk and his intelligence, they cannot risk losing that because there's nothing else. There's no other Vegapunk. They're shit out of luck. So the world government would make sure to keep him in a safe location at all times, whether it be at Marijois or some underground bunker or something, only leaving when he absolutely has to. You know, they would not like, all right, yeah, just go out there and fight that war against Whitebeard. I'm sure you'll be fine. You know, if shit is unlucky and Whitebeard grabs Kizaru and like strangles the life out of him, they are screwed. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal. Also, you have the issue with him doing this double life thing as a head scientist and also an admiral. Okay, being an admiral is, like I said, it's one of the highest ranks in the entire Marines. Okay, it's like one notch below fleet admiral, alright? There's, like, stuff you have to do as an admiral, okay? It's not all just peaches and cream, alright? We've seen Kizaru just chilling out in his office, clipping his freaking fingernails and just listening to field reports, okay? There's stuff he has to do. There's paperwork he has to fill out. He doesn't just sit around and chill out all day. There's stuff he has to do as an admiral. but he's also the head scientist that also has to develop all this new technology and everything. Like, to put this in perspective, this would be like if the head of research and development for Microsoft, you know, the software company, the person that's in charge of coming up with all the new concepts and ideas for what Microsoft's going to come out with next year, the person that has all the technical skills, all the knowledge, all the ideas on how all this stuff works, the head of all of that stuff at Microsoft was also the CEO of Microsoft, or was also the vice president of Microsoft. You know, like, oh yeah, I'm in charge of research and figuring out all this stuff, but I also have to attend all these board meetings and do all this stuff that the vice president is also required to do. You know, that would be sort of like unproductive from one end to the other. Now, you might just say, oh, well, yeah, for a normal person, but Kizaru has the power of the Pika Pika no Mi. He can move at light speed. So it's possible for him to be working at the lab 1 minute, and then he could zip over there and pull some Clark Kent routine and switch into his Admiral outfit. Yeah, okay, he can move really fast, but he can't be in 2 places at once. That would still be massively unproductive for him. Be like, yeah, alright, I'm gonna zip over here really quick and listen to this fucking field report. Now I'm gonna zip back to the lab and work on my pacifistas. Now I'm gonna zip over here and do some other Admiral shit. You know, he can't be in 2 places at once. He can just move really fast. And that kind of throws a wrench in the whole trying to keep it a secret routine, whereas only the Gorosei or only a select number of people know about his true identity. If he's using his Pika Pika no Mi powers, zipping around these locations, you know, performing Admiral duties while performing the duties of Vegapunk as the head scientist, people would take notice of him zipping around at light speed, doing all this stuff all the time. So it just doesn't seem practical. It just doesn't seem like, yeah, let's have him be one of the highest rankings in the Marines, all these extra duties he has to do as a symbol of authority and stuff like that, but also let's keep him as a head scientist. You know, it just seems unproductive. It just seems it wouldn't make sense. And of course, the threat of him getting injured or killed in a war with a fucking Yonko, they would not even bother taking that risk. Okay, so that's the 4th one. And now the final thing I have, this involves Frankie. So we all know Frankie, when he was sent flying by Bartholomew Kuma, arrived at, Baltimore, the future land. This was the homeland of Vegapunk, and Vegapunk was there ever since, this was his childhood home, you know, and we don't know how long Vegapunk stayed on this island. We don't know how old Vegapunk is. I would assume he's somewhere probably, he's an old dude. He's old, he's probably around the age of, like, Sengoku or Suru or somebody like that. In fact, during Punk Hazard, one of the G5 Marines mentioned, you know, that old sod Vegapunk, or that old man Vegapunk, something of that nature, referring to him as an old geezer or something like that. Now, to be fair, Kizaru is the eldest out of all of the admirals. He's 56 before the time skip, and he's 58 after the time skip. But considering all the other old people in One Piece, would somebody really be referring to, like, a 56-year-old as an old sod, old geezer, old man? Seems to be referring more to, like, you know, an actual older guy, like Sengoku's age, Garp's age, something like that. But yeah, we don't know how old he is, but he spent his childhood, probably also his teenage years, maybe into his 20s, living on Baltimore. And he had his lab there and figuring out all this stuff, and creating the cyborg animals, and the giant thing in the mountain to try to heat the island, which was a failure. You know, that's where he spent his life. Okay, Frankie lived on this island for 2 damn years. Okay, I'm pretty sure at some point he probably saw a picture of what Vegapunk looked like. Now, yeah, Frankie was on this island to, like, learn how to, like, you know, the new technology and building, you know, the updated weapons for the Sunny and the FRU-4 and the Frankie Shogun. That's what he was doing on the island. But I'm sure every now and then Frankie was kind of, like, just chilling out, resting after a long day's work, and there were people on the island that brought him cola. He, you know, it's like, what's up with Vegapunk? I mean, he lived in his damn house for 2 years. There's not a single photograph of Vegapunk around, and Frankie would have connected the dots like, holy shit, he's actually Kizaru this whole time, you know. And you can't even bring up, well, maybe he looked different when he was younger as opposed to when he was older. Like I said, they say childhood home, but I like to think, you know, Vegapunk lived on this island up through his teens and his 20s. And we saw the image from when Kizaru was a kid. He kind of looks a lot like, aside from the lack of the goatee and the glasses, he looks like pretty much the same. You'd be able to connect the dots here. Frankie's a weirdo, but he's not an idiot, all right? You think every now and then somebody would have told him a story. There are people that personally knew Vegapunk that live on this island. His family might still be there, for God's sake. No one ever, like, told Frankie about a story involving him. Like, oh yeah, this is a little story about Vegapunk. This is what he looked like, blah, blah, blah. And Frankie you know, if it was actually Kizaru, he would have, like, probably mentioned that to the crew. Now, even if Frankie knows what he looks like, which I think it's pretty obvious Frankie knows that what Vegapunk looks like, at least maybe an older picture of him somewhere, why wouldn't he bring that up to the crew? There's no reason to. The Straw Hat crew do not really give a shit about Vegapunk. They don't really care about Vegapunk. It's not a big concern to them. Alright, so it's not like Frankie's gonna show up like, guys, the old scientist Vegapunk, the guy that built Kuma, he's an old dude with like an afro and glasses. They'd be like, oh, okay, cool. You know, like who cares? You know, unless like it was Kizaru, he would have brought it up. Like, guys, guess what? Kizaru turned out to be Vegapunk this whole time. He'd be like, what? You know, but yeah, he was probably sitting there in Vegapunk's lab, probably learned about it from somebody. He's like, yeah, by the way, you know, Vegapunk, this is what he looks like. And Frankie was like, oh, okay, that's a kind of super old man right there. And then he goes back to building a fucking motorcycle or whatever. Like, that's probably what happened with Frankie living on his homeland in Vegapunk's homeland for 2 years. Probably would have learned that. So that's pretty much everything I have. Now, there's a few other things that people have brought up, like why Kizaru talks very slow and he acts kind of stupid. You know, like he couldn't figure out like the difference between the black Den Den Mushi and the normal one. You know, and so to that I have to say, Kizaru is not stupid. All right, he's an admiral. All right, he is intelligent. All right, not necessarily genius level, but you don't become an admiral because you're a freaking idiot or a moron. All right, it doesn't happen. All right. Kizaru, usually when he shows up, he talks very slow. He's very forgetful. You know, but Aokiji's very lazy. It's just a quirky thing that it's supposed to be shown. And the idea here, I think the joke, is that Oda gave Kizaru the power of light speed, the light fruit, and yet Kizaru speaks very slow. You know, I think that's the joke. He usually shows up looking like he's high as a kite, usually most of the times, all right? But he's not an idiot, all right? And you don't screw with him. You don't take him for... You just don't just assume, like, oh, he's a moron. He can't do anything. He's smart. He will drop kick you within 2 seconds. He's very unpredictable is what he is. That's what the word I used to describe him in my, like, Kizaru discussion video. Like, he's a very unpredictable guy. He shows up and he's like, hey, guys, how you doing? Do you know where Sentomaru is? You don't? Okay. Oh, by the way, you're a pirate with a 249 million berry bounty. I gotta take you in now. And that's when he lightspeed kicks Hawkins into a wall. All right. He's not an idiot. He just talks slow. He's very laid back. You know, he's very forgetful sometimes. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's a straight up moron. All right, because he wouldn't have achieved the rank if otherwise. Same thing with Akainu, same thing with Aokiji, same thing with Fujitora. Akainu is a hot-headed guy, he's not an idiot. Aokiji is lazy, he's not an idiot. All right, that's how that goes there. And there's some other stuff as well, but I think I hit the main points to address right here. I think I've kind of looked at it and definitively, maybe not definitively, but I've kind of looked at it as like there's enough gaps in this theory that I think I can debunk it. I don't think it's very likely that Kizaru is going to turn out to be Vegapunk. And also, just personally for me, that would seem like a cop-out. You know, it would just feel like, oh yeah, by the way, this mysterious scientist that's been discussed, you know, many times throughout One Piece and is always a shadowy figure. Like, we saw him as a silhouette in Kuma's flashback. We saw him as just, like, the back of his lab coat with Caesar's flashback. You know, all this stuff. We've such a mysterious character. Turned out to be Kizaru this whole time. It just turned out to be Kizaru this whole time. I would feel like that's sort of a cop-out. And if Oda is going to reveal, you know, that that's actually the case, on the off chance that that's the situation, he's going to have to do a lot of explaining on how this actually works, okay? And there's a lot of issues I just addressed here, like, okay, well, you know, how does he keep his, you know, identity secret from all the Marines? How does he move around like this throughout the Marine bases? How could he balance his job as an admiral and a head scientist? You know, things of that nature, you know, so we'll see how this goes, but I think I can debunk this. Alright, so thanks everybody for watching. Leave your comments below on what you think about this. This is Tekking101 signing out. Later, guys.